Okay, we got lots of light shining in the window here. So if you look on the drawing, let's zoom in a little bit, you can see that, oh, I cast a shadow. From the top of our taper, there should be 3.5 inches of knurling when we're all done, plus that 375 or 375 thousandths for the rounded end. So if I add those two together, 3.5 plus 0.375, I get 3.875. I know from the end of this taper at the knurling to the end here, the finished dimension should be that 3.875. I have to machine away what we have for a hole in the end of that. Remember, we measured it out to, what was it, 374, I think it was. So, I added those two together. I've got the caliper set. You can't see it because of the light, to that dimension. I'm going to set it as closely as I can from where that taper ends to right there. Now, ideally, I would use something a little bit better marker than a pencil. It's what I happen to have. We're going to part this off, and we'll round that in. We want to make sure that the parting tool is nice and square to our piece. So we're going to do that the same as we did with the knurling tool earlier. Take the square, have it held tightly against our piece, and check to make sure the ruler is touching all the way along. We're already there right now. So now we're going to snug that up. The other thing we have to do is we have to raise this so it's going to line up at the center of our piece. I'm going to try and do that by lining it up here at the end and pretty close to center. So everything's good where we're at. We're going to back out here. Now this we're going to do at, let me bring my line around, and I'm going to leave my line. We can always face this to the exact dimension after, but we want to, okay. But we want to make sure we're nice and straight. Just like when we were knurling, we're going to slow the machine down, low range, so when we turn, it's not going super fast. Now, one thing to remember when you're using the parting tool is lots of lubrication. It does make a lot of heat. A couple of shots here of oil right to start, and we'll add it quite often as we go. So, start it in, and we're just using the cross feed because we're going straight in. And you can even use the parting tool just to cut a groove in something if you'd like. We've done this with the other project on the plumb bobs, to actually cut details into the piece. Now I just adjusted this slightly so we didn't have as much stick out because it was getting a little bit of vibration. So we moved it in. We've only got about 2 inches sticking out. Again, it's more securely held here, and the less there is out at this end, the less chance of a vibration. And that's much better. And we're just going gently. Parting tool is fairly narrow. You need it to actually do the cutting. That's the bell for the first day you're going to start working on the first video from this series. I will actually talk to you in seconds, but I'll talk to you days from now on here. You can see that the groove is getting deeper and deeper, getting pretty thin at the center. that's it. Yeah. As it was oil, there's a lot of that sticking there. We'll clean that off. Now we will have to come in with the single point tool and clean that off. It did leave a little nipple in the center. I'm going to actually just slowly, if I can, without making you guys bounce around a whole lot, bring you in and show you what the end looks like after we parted it. Pretty much a straight cut right across. It's just left a little nipple. We're just going to go on and face that off. Okay, I did a little bit of math. From the length that we are to the length that we need to be is a difference of 0.475. Now, the carriage hand wheel doesn't have a vernier scale on it. I can't just watch it and see how far I travel. But what does have a vernier scale I can look at is the compound rest. All I did is turned it, loosened up the nuts, same as we did when we were setting our 11-degree angle. I set this to 90 degrees, so it's straight on with the chuck. So now I can pay attention to how much I advance the cutting tool, and as I face this off, I'm only going to go 475. Keep track of it on there. I'll set you up and we'll actually cut this. So what I did is I zeroed it out first. I came in and touched off on the end with the compound rest, set it to 0. And I'm going to back off with the cross feed so I'm not touching it. Start the machine. I'm going to advance the compound rest, let's say 10 thousandths. Face off at 10 thousandths. Now I'm going to take it out and measure it and double check. Hopefully we're right where we need to go. And now if I set that on there, it's exactly right at the end of that knurling. Kind of depends on which tooth of the knurling we look at. But we're within a thousandth of an inch, so we're pretty good. So now, next step. Seems to always be a next step. What we're going to do is round this end so we can finish with that end completely. Okay, so now we're going to round this end so we can be finished with the handle end completely. I'm going to put it back in the chuck. What's the chuck handle? And I'll leave a couple of inches sticking out here. And sort of split right halfway down this handle. And again, don't kill it when you're tightening these. You don't want to squish your knurling. There are a couple of ways that we can shape this end into the round end that we want. Actually, more than a couple. Two easiest ones. I'm going to demonstrate one for you. The other one we could, but anyway. All along we've been calling this a single point cutting tool. But what we can do is change that. We could use the flat edge of this to cut an angle on here. So I'll demonstrate really quickly. Come in with that flat. And I'm adjusting a little bit with each the hand wheel and the cross feed. Just to see which cuts best. big angle on this. Just take a little bit of metal. And then just shatter. What I want to do is cut this little bit of an angle all the way to the center right here. Which is pretty close to there. There we go. That's got a little bit of a chamfer cut to it. Then I can take my wrench, loosen this up again, rotate it a little more. Do the same thing again, rid of that so you can see, and cut at a little bit more of an angle. If I do it again at a little bit more of an angle, I'm not going to go all the way to the center. Again, feed it in. Probably take away that squealing. But we're getting a little bit of a chatter because we're using that edge. And we could do that in subsequent angles until we get something pretty close to round here. And then we're going to finish it with the file. Any facets or spots where that angle changes, we're just going to use the file to blend those in. Blend was a word I couldn't think of. That's one way to do this. The other is, we've already used that cross feed. If I loosen it up again, grab my wrench, and I can rotate the cross feed. Remember, we're at 90 degrees right now. I can loosen that up. I can set it to whatever angle I want. Come in here, so we can actually cut. Okay, let's say that's more of an angle than we've got. Tighten that back up. Okay, come on in here fairly close, back out, so we're not going to try and take everything at once. Back and forth the same as before. And again, that time comes about a halfway across where you had the last angle cut. Stop. Again, get that cut made, loosen this off. We're going to make a little less of an angle for the next one. Ooh, not quite there. Let's say in this, I'm not setting anything specific. I'm just basically cutting 4 or 5 different angles to the end of this. And then I'm going to shape it with the file. Get the final cut. So, from there I'm not quite touching. Didn't make a huge change in angle there, I guess. We get it all cut, and there's little facets all over it, and I've just been taking the file, blending those all together. So that now, there's a little wee spot right at the end of it, a 1 millimeter flat spot. Just trying to blend it in so it's nice and round the whole way. Other thing, when you go to measure this, hey, it's supposed to be 375. Am I there? You have to sort of eyeball it, because you can't, if you put it this way, you're measuring the length of that angle. We want straight from the end. So I'm going to sort of eyeball so that one side lines up at the end, the other side's up here. Now, hey, helps to zero it. Especially when you get a number that doesn't make sense. Zero out your caliper to see if it does. There we go. That's more like it. And if we go right there, I have a little bit more knurling than I need, and this is a little bit less than my 3/8. No big deal. Overall length would still be fine. But if I want to make that exactly like the drawing, I can take the file, hold it flat, just remove that little bit of knurling here to get it smooth, to extend this and to shorten up the knurled section. And since I'm just removing a little wee bit of material, trying to make sure I don't keep going further onto the knurling, and then angle it slightly to blend whatever facet you may have made in with the rest of the curve. Okay, nice and round. We have 3/8 at the end, or we should have. Pretty darn close. Now, it's still kind of a little rough from the file. We'll do the same thing we did before. We're going to grab a piece of emery cloth and just smooth that out. Now, looks pretty smooth. Right here you can see a little bit of marking in the knurling. That is from the grit that was coming off of the emery cloth and a little bit of metal filings from the end. Squirt with some brake clean or some other solvent will clean that right out of there. Now a couple of these other marks you might see, that's from, I over tightened it on these at one point or another. I left a couple of marks from the jaws. So now the handle end is done. We're going to move on and finish the other end. Now again, we have a measurement from the end of that taper to the end here. Don't ever leave that there. So first thing we're going to do is part off that end. Big thing to remember when you're cutting off this end. Do not, and I repeat, do not, because I've seen the same mistake happen too many times, clamp this in here on the handle and be out here working trying to cut that off, whichever way we do it. Because I will guarantee with the pressure of that tool on here and that's spinning, it's going to bend right there. You get a banana. What you do if you're going to work this end, loosen that up, slide it in all the way so that the handle is beyond the jaws, so you're clamping just on that skinny part. Only a little bit sticking out, it's less likely to bend or deflect as you're going. You snug that up, make sure it's not going anywhere. With this, we're not taking a huge amount of material. It's pretty skinny. We don't need to do that much work. All we really need to do, rotate that cutting tool so just the tip is going to contact, and come in and make a few facing passes to get rid of that hole. Now remember, that hole is center drilled in, what did we say, 3.34 I think on this end, give or take. So in that far, that's hollow. Just get a little shell on the outside. It takes hardly anything to make it machine away. Now, if you're thinking right now, but he never measured where he's going to go with that. True. But I do know that that entire hole has to disappear. So I can do facing passes like this, at least until that hole is completely gone. Then I'll pull it out and measure it and see how much more. And then we can do the same thing. Well, not quite the same thing we did at the other end. Because I don't want this at the finished dimension right now. I want it a little bit long. Because, not a huge amount, a little bit. Because remember, we're going to thread this. Well, the hole is gone. It actually left a little nipple. Raise this a touch. Remember, we're going to thread this into the handle and then file it so it blends with the top of the handle. If we take this right to the exact 4 inches now, we won't have any material to file off at the top. We're going to measure it because we don't want like 4.5. We're not going to file off that much, but we want it relatively close. We want about 1/8 of an inch or 0.125 sticking out, and then we'll file that off. And I'll show you how we're going to get to exactly our 4 inches when we're cutting threads on this. I'm going to check how much material we have. So from where that taper ends, we want to have 4 inches. We've got 4.1. Perfect. We don't have a huge amount we're going to have to file off here, but it's not so short that we're not going to be able to. So next thing, we're going to cut the threads on the end of this. Okay, we've got the handle in the vise, straight up and down, or straight up and down as we can get it. Before I try and cut the threads, there's a little bit of a burr right around the edge of that from our parting it. Or not parting, but facing off the end. I'm just going to take a file, get rid of that burr. And one thing I am doing is I'm taking a little bit more than just the burr. I'm not going very far. I'm putting just a hint of a chamfer on the end of that. The only reason I'm doing that, and you can see I'm not taking a whole lot of material, is with a very slight chamfer on the end of that, it's going to make it a little easier to start the die down here to cut our threads. The next question could be, well, how far do I go? I don't want to go too far. I got to check it. I know that I have to at least go that far. I can take the head, hold it up against it, and I'm going to mark this a little short because I don't want to have a mark that's too far down. And when it's up close to this, it'll be hard to get off later. So, I've got that. I will have to go beyond that mark, but once I get there, I'm going to check it. You can see at the top there, it's a 3/8/16 die in the die handle. Now, if you look at these teeth inside here, and you probably won't be able to tell in this video, on one side versus the other, this side, the teeth are full depth all the way to the end. On this one, and it's not by very much, but those first couple of teeth, and it probably won't, yeah. First couple of teeth have a tiny bit of taper to them. Not a lot, not like the tap did. So now we're going to take that with that side that's got a little bit of a taper to it, set it on here, hold it nice and square, and myself, so because if you rock as you're trying to start these, you'll tear out the little bit of thread that you're starting. But if you keep it nice and straight, and I walk right around with it rather than turn my hands, and then I'll let it go and come around this side, and I get a light pressure down so those teeth can actually start cutting in. There we go. Now, at this point you want to make sure that it's in soft jaws because you don't want to clamp in on your knurling with the teeth of this. It'll crush them for sure. And it has to be fairly tight because this takes a little bit of torque to do it. So once it's cutting, and actually maybe you guys can see this. Make a big burr. I'm just going to bring you over. If you look straight down that die, doesn't want to stay focused. There we go. See those little pieces of metal that are curled up? That's the material you're removing to make the threads. That's the same thing that the tap did in those flutes as you were turning it down. That's why we would back up to break those off. So I got those, then I would turn backwards. And I don't know if I can do this one-handed. And you see those break off. I come back to where I was and continue. Now I'm going to put some oil on this before I turn any more because I don't want to wear out my die. And then we'll come back and we'll finish cutting these threads. Okay. Get this to come. I don't want to squirt it across the table. There we go. And that'll work its way around. And again, about 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn. Back up, knock those off. Back to where we were, another turn, knock those off. I know I'm in the neighborhood. Back this back out. Don't drop it when you take it off. Okay, we've got the perfect depth checker right here. All I did is screw my head onto the handle. I'm down as far as I go, still not quite to the top. We've got approximately 1/8 of an inch or so still to go. So I'm going to screw that back off. Just put my hand here to catch it in case it falls when it comes off the end, so it doesn't hit the floor and damage my head. Okay. I'm going to start this back on. Be careful not to cross thread it. Remember, they're sharp. They'll cut threads. They'll also cut out threads that you want to still be there. Just eyeballing it. Without doing any math, I'm going to say for 1/8 of an inch that we need, that's going to be around 2 full revolutions on this. So I'm going to screw it down to where we stopped. It'll be down pretty easy. I'm going to pay attention to the orientation of this. I'm going to go there's a little over half. There's 1 full revolution. There's about 2 full revolutions. Let's see how close I was on figuring that's roughly our depth. If this comes all the way through, then we're going to measure the overall length to see how close to 8.5 we are. Okay, we're sticking out just a touch. Now, that's just lightly tightened. When we put it together for the final time, we're going to snug this up. pretty good. So, judging by that, I probably was way off on 2 revolutions. One probably would have brought us flush. So, as tight as it'll go, gives us a dimension we can measure. So now we're going to measure this and see how close we are. Okay, apparently I didn't get what I was trying to show you. So I assembled it, put the head on, tightened it down really good and tight, and then measured it. And I was measuring, remember we need exactly 4 inches from the end of this taper here to the end of our handle, which is going to be the face of the head. So I put it on, measured it. We were a little bit longer than 4 inches. Took that back off, put the die back on it, took another half turn, went back, put that back on, tried it, needed a little more, put the die back on, took about another half turn. And then the final one was about a quarter of a turn, measured it, and we're bang on 4 inches from the end of that to the end of the head. So now it's exactly the right length when it's assembled. Don't need that die anymore. So now I get a bottle of Loctite. This is, I know you can hardly read it, it's getting scratched off. It's permanent strength Loctite. So I'm only going to put a few drops of it on the threads of the handle. When it dries, you will probably never ever be able to get this apart again. You could if you put heat to it or something like that, or were extremely persistent. But in normal use for what this hammer's ever going to see, it's never going to come apart. So, grab it. And this is cut at a taper to make it easy to do it standing up. Couple of drops. Now, when I turn this on, thread this down, the threads are going to spread that evenly around the whole thing. Now, if you put it on and only just screwed it loosely, well, yeah, eventually it's going to come loose. It won't hold that. But if we tighten this up, German tight, good and tight, and enough that don't strip it, don't go that tight, but there you go. I'm just going to tighten that a little more because what was happening was turning there, is to make sure I'm there, as far as I'm going to get. I don't want to twist this or tear out my threads. At this point, that part of it's all done. The only thing I have left is, you can see that little bump sticking out. We want to get rid of it. Now, I'm going to file it off. I'm not going to get on here, try and file with this way up. You can see how much vibration I get. Loosen the vise. Lower this down. Now, I can't put this right in the middle because the handle's in the way. Put it in as far as you can. Make sure get back here. Soft jaws are on, and then it's snug that way. Again, trying to keep it flat. And this is the reason we didn't put a finish on this face, because we're going to grab that coarse file that we had been using before, cross filing. We're going to take off that end. Then we're going to blend it right into this. It'll take me a couple minutes to get there, so I'm going to put you guys on pause, and then I'll show you when we get to that step. We're now down flush with the surface of the hammer. Only thing left to do is the same steps we did before, and I'm not going to show you those all over again. We're going to, now it's cross-filed evenly with the coarse file. Now we're going to cross-file with a smooth file, draw file, then draw file with all 3 of our different grits of emery cloth, and make it shine. And I'll come back when I'm done. There we go. That's down to roughly the same finish as we got all the other sides when we were doing them earlier. bring this over. And looking right there, tell me where the handle comes through. So if you do this well enough, now if I get close enough, you can probably see it. Depends on what angle I come to. But you can still see it a little. There's a couple scratches. I might have to go back to that. But that head, well, right there I can see it a little bit. There's one spot right there that shows up more than the rest. But we're pretty good. Only one last step I'm going to do to this as far as working on it, and then I'm going to show you guys what I do to mark them. Okay, I'm now at the buffing wheel. When you turn it on, I'm going to take the buffing compound, put a little bit on these once they're turning. Just rub it across the surface of it. This is a extremely fine abrasive. I'm going to do it always going away from an edge. If I did this and brought this in here, it's going to grab that edge and pull it out of my hand. So always doing it so it's coming away from an edge. Okay, I grabbed a clean rag because that polishing compound, as you're going, can leave a little film. So it might look like you're not quite as shiny as you are. Wipe it off. And I don't know if you can see the fact that you can see the phone in the reflection on that. Now, sure, we could make it a little bit better, but we're getting pretty close. I'm going to finish the other sides and the shiny part of the handle and the ball on the other end, and then we'll see where we're at. Now you're done your part. Hammer complete. Looks good. Pass it in. Like so. Then put it in the bin where you're going to pass it in. Last thing I'm going to show you in this whole series is how do I mark them? What do I look for? I'm going to flip you around here so you can see, and I'm going to go through each step. There's 13 things I mark. 10 marks for each category. I was just looking down at the rubric. 1 second, I'll flip you around so you can see. Here's the rubric that I use to mark them. I fill in everybody's name down the side and do it all in one sheet. Overall length, 10 points. If it's exactly 8.5 inches, full 10 points. Lose a little bit for every little bit that it's shorter or longer. Full 10 points is exactly on the dimension. The length of the knurling should be exactly 3.5 inches. We measure it. If it's not, well, plus or minus, you'll lose some either direction. Shaft length. So from the end of the taper to the end of that head, which is where the end of your handle is, measure that. If it's exactly on the 4 inches, 10 points. Taper. I check to see how close to 11 degrees that taper is. Now, do I have a way to measure it really, really well? No. But what I did do, when I drew this drawing originally, I was extremely precise in marking this angle at 11 degrees exactly. I can take your hammer, lay it on here, try and get this lined up, and I try and line up the edge of the handle and of the stem and the handle and see how close. And get her straight here with one hand. Oh, back this way. When I'm lined up, because if I go back a little bit, you can see my line, so I'm right on it. And I am back up. You can see I'm right on that line. You know, if I come back far enough, you can see line here and there the same amount. So pretty darn close to 11 degrees. That one reach over here. That one I showed you before, if I tried to put it on there and match it up the same way. There we go. Lined up this way, a little touch. Line it up, you can see that angle doesn't line up evenly. Remember I said that was the mistake on this one. That angle was off, and you can see how I checked that. It's not extremely precise, but it's close. Not marking super hard on that anyway. So, the angle, it has to be quite a bit off for me to not see it. Handle diameter and shaft diameter. Again, take a micrometer, measure the stem at any point, measure the handle at any point. This end should be 650. This end over here should be 375. And I was able to cut the threads on the outside of this pretty easily, so I know it's not bigger than that. If you leave it bigger, it's harder to cut the threads. You can't get that die to start. And that's what some people run into. Round end. I'm going to look. Did you make a nice round end? Is it measured from the end in the 375 that it's supposed to be? Plus or minus for how much longer or shorter it is. I jumped around a bit there. Oh, the second taper is the taper on the hammer head. Right? Is it even? Does it have the same amount top and bottom? Because with some of these, if your layout was wrong or you didn't have it straight in the mill, you'll have one side that's really, really long and the other side that's not. So again, I'll do it the same as I did the other taper. Again, I was very precise when I was making this drawing. Line that up on the bottom edge, and that taper lines up there. If I just move it up just a hair, you can see it. Oh, get back here. There, if I do it right there. Oh, I'm tilted you. I can see the line right at the edge all the way across here and up. So that's right on. And I come to this side and do the same thing. Oh, let's turn you guys around. Have to cut that a little bit. Do the same thing on the other edge. Line it up. Where'd I go here? Oh, it's too high. I'll look past the phone, not through it. Trying to get it turned line. There we go. So now I bumped it. So with that line, I can just see it all the way along. Lines right up with the line there. And this at the end is the part that we filed off. So we're pretty darn close there. Come up a little bit. There we go. Pretty darn close both sides on that taper. Again, if it doesn't come anywhere near it on the paper, or when we check it, doesn't come close to that angle, you're going to lose some marks, plus or minus. Chamfer, the next thing on the list. It's that chamfer on the corners. Remember, it should be about 1/8 of an inch wide there. Back 1 1/8. Wasn't able to get as good a finish on it. I could have spent more time and polished those a little bit more. See that one, that one. Again, 10 marks. Finish. How shiny is it? Is it still full of like rough scratches? Looks like you just, cross-filed with a coarse file and said that's enough. And I got fingerprints all over that. It won't stay shiny with my dirty fingers. There we go. Looks better when I wipe it off. And I'm looking at all sides, the handle, the far end. What's the finish look like? Pretty good? Awesome. Hole location. Is that hole actually 1.5 inches from the end? Right, I'm going to measure to the center of the hole. And is it centered this way on that head? And did I skip over the knurling? Yeah, I did. Knurling was the last thing. Is the knurling nice and consistent? Now, I'm not going to take off marks because there's a mark from the chuck. Nice and consistent, even. Doesn't look like I went back and forth over it. Is it exactly the 3.5 inches that it's supposed to be? There's a nice picture of it there. I measured the length that's knurled. Now there's a little plus or minus there because as we took it off with a file, those last little bit are a little bit tapered. So I'm not super judgy there as long as it's pretty darn close. If I'm marking my own, I'd be a little pickier. But that's it. Those 13 things, 10 points each. And we'd have a mark. Okay, now you've seen every step in building this hammer. Some of you never got a chance to finish. This way you've seen every single step and what you got to do to make this as good as you possibly can. We went from rough steel in the rack to finished project. When you go out in the shop, don't forget the most important thing, safety glasses. And I'll see you next time right here in Campbell's shop today. Have a good day, guys.